with Matt Pinfield. Today's guest, Bob Mould.
Hey, it's Matt Pinfield. Welcome to In a Lonely Place. We do this every Friday, and I just wanted to say you're never in a lonely place if you got music in your life. And, a lot of people are still isolated during this pandemic. Some people are really afraid to go out, and others are going out. And hopefully most people are being smart, being safe, and considerate of their fellow man and women. Like myself, you know what I mean? I always wear a mask out and just socially distant, do what I have to do, and still carrying on with life, which is important. But one of the best things that I did during this pandemic was start this show. So I'm so excited to have our guest tonight because I love this artist and have for such a long time. I mean, I've been a fan of his since his band. He started Husker Du back at the end of the 1970s, early 80s. It was one of the artists that I played through college radio and then commercial alternative radio for years. And then his band Sugar, who I absolutely loved as well. And all of his solo stuff that he's done over the years. And he has a brand new solo album out, which is great. And we're going to talk all about it. It's called Blue Hearts. So I want to welcome to the show, Bob Mould. Bob, how are you?
Doing well, Matt. How are you? How are you today?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for doing the show, Bob. I was so excited that I could get a hold of you and that you're willing to do it. It's we haven't seen each other since 2011. Which was that great event at the Walt Disney Music Hall when a bunch of your friends came out and played. Everybody from, Dave Grohl and Britt Daniel to, John Worcester from your band. And just so many people were there that night. It was fantastic to see a little light, the celebration. And also, in recognition of your book as well, which was incredible. So I love that night. It was such an honor to be a part of it. You know what I mean? To come down and kind of host the thing for you. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you could make it. That was a really special evening. Again, the book had come out in June of 2011, and it was an interesting time for me. It was right before I started work. It was right as I was getting ready to start working with Merge Records. And like I said, John Worcester and Jason Narducci, my bandmates, had been on board for a couple of years, and we had a little bit of touring under our belt. And that evening was really, really great, just to be surrounded by friends and yourself included, and just celebrating that crazy life that I had up to that point, and now we got 9 more years of stuff to get caught up on.
Yeah, we absolutely do, which is amazing. I want to go back and do some historic things too, but I want to talk about the new record because I love this album. Sunshine Rock was great. It was about 18 months earlier that came out, but when things started just going crazy this past year, it was the perfect time for you to release the single American Crisis, which I loved. And I remember because Chris, who works on producing the show with me here, is like, have you listened to the new Bob Mould American Crisis? Man, he's got fervor and he's angry at it. And it was just, I love the feeling of the record because there's the thing about the album is, it reflects a lot on what's going on in our lives, from every aspect, from a political aspect and, but also from an emotional introspective aspect. And, you take songs like When You Left, and Little Pieces, Heart on My Sleeve, things that are great. So, I mean, it's got a really nice balance of those two things, Yeah. It was time, while this was all going down, were you about to hit the road? What were you doing when the pandemic hit, Bob?
When the pandemic hit, I had just gotten back from mixing the album. To sort of set the whole story up for people, the song American Crisis, which is, the first track out and the center point of the record, I wrote that in April of 2018 when I was living in Berlin, Germany. And you mentioned Sunshine Rock, which, was the 2019 album. So, American Crisis was written during the Sunshine Rock writing period, but it was, I wanted that album to be more optimistic. The 2 albums I had made previous were a little bit darker. So, I looked at the content of American Crisis, and it took me 5 minutes to write that song. Those words just fell out on the page, and, they're still true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we had the song in the in the mix for Sunshine Rock, but it was just a little dark for that album. So I kept it in my pocket. We went out and we toured Sunshine Rock in 2019. I was still over in Berlin. I was doing a lot of solo electric shows in the summer and fall of 2019. And I just started writing a lot of aggressive guitar music, sort of around American Crisis. Songs like When You Left or Siberian Butterfly, all of that stuff just started coming in a rush. And, Thanksgiving of 2019, I came back from Berlin to San Francisco, where I am now. And man, I'm telling you, I was just astonished at how polarized America had become. I was watching the news in Germany, and I was, commuting back and forth over the entirety of the Trump administration. And, I knew things were bad, but when I got back here and, that news as entertainment, 24-hour news, constant, polarity on social media, my head just started burning. I was like, how can we be back at this place again, but 100 times worse than I remember from the 80s? So, January of 2020, I had 3 weeks of solo electric touring set up, and I was out in the Northeast, and I was trying out a lot of the material that became the Blue Hearts album. And it was funny. Matt, I remember the first show I was playing in Fall River, Massachusetts at like a performing arts center. And I come out and I do packs of songs, right? I'm doing Hoover Dam and Favorite Thing and, The Descent, all the songs people like. And then in the middle of the show, I stop and I start telling people about these ideas that I'm having about, Reagan 1983 and Trump 2019. And I start playing these songs, and they're very, like Heart on My Sleeve, and I think I was playing Next Generation and Forecast of Rain, and the crowd was loving it. They're like, oh my God, he's pissed off again. He's angry. These are political songs. And I remember there was a couple of hecklers in the crowd that night, guys talking about their 401ks doing so well and stuff. And I told them, I said, I'd be glad to, here's an investment for you. I'll give you double your money back if you leave right now. And just so anybody knows, that's a standing offer from here on out.
Yeah, it's amazing that you did that.
You one of my gigs and you start spouting that far right stuff at me, you can take double your money and leave, because nobody needs to hear it. But anyway, so I'm doing 3 weeks of touring like this, and I'm going out telling people this story, these parallels between the first Reagan administration and the Trump administration. And at the end of the night, I go out to the merch table and I'm, meeting people and seeing friends and signing records and doing that stuff. And people are just coming up saying, what you're saying, you have to keep saying this. You have to keep telling people this message, this is important. So, when that tour finished, the next day, I think it was February 1st, was the last show. February 2nd, I took my rental car back to LaGuardia, flew to O'Hare, picked up a car. Actually, I got an Uber with my guitar, my pedal board, and my 3 weeks of clothes, and went to Steve Albini's place, met up with John and Jason, and we spent 2 weeks making this record. So, I got home from Chicago on Valentine's Day night, and my partner, who studied virology in med school, second I walk in the house, I'm like, honey, I'm home. And he's like, sit down on the couch. I have to tell you what's happening in the world.
That's amazing.
There's a pandemic. Oh my God, I studied this. And oh no, this is going to be really bad. There's going to be a lot of casualties. When this thing starts to spread, it's going to be insane. We're going to have to lock down half the world. And sure enough, everything he said was right. So, I was here, we mixed the record in Oakland and had it mastered in Chicago, and that was all by March 1st. The album was called Blue Hearts. I started working on the artwork with the art director from Merge Records, and he lives in Milwaukee, did a great job on the cover. And, and then we locked down around St. Patrick's Day, right? Was that mid-March? Yeah. So that was everything that led up to mid-March. And then we got locked down. And then, I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? anyways, we got to make a campaign. So I'm talking with the record company and my publicist. In early April, we decide American Crisis is the first song. Let's make a lyric video and let's put it out on June 1st. And that was a Monday. And if everybody recalls, Monday, June 1st was what I like to call the Bible walk. You know, remember when Trump came out of his bunker and tear gassed everybody so that he could stand in front of a church across the park that he'd never been in with a Bible that his daughter gave him. They held upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that was the same exact day. Unbelievable.
Right. You can't make this stuff up. So that was early June. American Crisis came out, the video. And then, we did a couple more videos for Forecast of Rain, Siberian Butterfly. And the album came out, I think, 4 weeks ago. So, so that's the long version of a short history.
It's amazing when you think about it. And Next Generation on that record, too, is just, that's just the lyrics to that song. Talk about how I feel all the time. I have daughters that are adults now, 2 daughters, but I think about them and my grandchildren and, people in the future, what they're going to have to, excuse me. This microphone just went. Did you hear that, by the way, Bob? Did that make a lot of noise?
Nah.
Okay. Oh, well, there. I don't think he really wants to stand up. Here we go. There we are. But, at that period of time, I was certainly thinking about it, just what kind of future do we leave for our children, our grandchildren, and, it just makes me very, very nervous. It's, Bob, you and I are the same age. So, we're like within months of each other. We were born. So, we grew up in a time when we thought, we were always told that we would always be doing better than the last generation. That was always the goal that people had, that, that you'd have more and that people sacrificed before you so that you could have more. And it's certainly becoming more and more evident that, people are moving back in with their parents and have to support, it's just not the same. The opportunities are not the same. And it's just a strange period, right?
Yeah, it's a real hard time. And I think, so many of the great cities of America and the great cities of the world were hit so hard by this first wave of coronavirus, and I'm a lifelong Democrat. And one thing that always frustrates me about the Republicans, beyond the religion and the whole pro-life business, all the stuff that they embody, is they really have it in for American cities. And I've never been able to figure this out, people, it's so much of in American cities, there's so much innovation and culture and vibrancy and people who contribute so much to the cities of America that can't really even afford to live in the cities. And, Republicans always, I remember in the 80s and 90s, slashing mental health, slashing social services. It's always the same story with these people, and it's really amazing. So, anyways, it's my list of grievances is long and wide, and I'll just leave it at I can't believe we're back here again.
Well, we are. It's interesting too. I have a friend who, he's a retired record promoter guy who I've known for years, and his son now does record promotion. But back in the day, he was in the SDS and Weather Underground, and he was also, there's a picture of him in the Kent State yearbook with his finger up to the National Guard like this, literally on the front page the year after the shooting took place. And he said to me on the phone recently, he goes, "It's worse than it was in the '68."
Yes,
how crazy it is. So, but
those were those. I barely remember those times. I remember them through music.
You and I were little kids. You and I were young kids, right? We were listening to radio. Listening to our 45s and albums, whatever we had. That's how we remember those times. I think you're exactly like me. You probably remember that year, that Beatles album or whatever. Or that Creedence or Birds, whatever, you know what I mean? The things.
Those things that were, when music, and that was the thing, Matt. And, I always bring this up with people, I hate to be the old guy, but, music can change the world still.
Yeah.
I'm still a real believer in that, even though the music business has changed and how people consume culture has changed. this idea of telling stories and trying to share your experiences with people, and hopefully everybody rallies together to try to make the world a better place. I mean, that was what I remember about the 60s as a kid, through music, through Woodstock, through Hendrix, through, just protest music in general. And it's, I guess for me with Blue Hearts, I sort of felt like it was a good time to, look through that lens, make some work that, shares my concerns, and people have been responding real well. So, that's remembering music in the 60s, and yeah, it still works. Still works.
I mean, it's great that we're protest music, and that you wrote a record like that. And I wish more people would. I always say that. And I've been saying it for a long time. I said, are people so doped up on their devices that they're not paying attention to things that are going on and not reacting and using their platform for the arts to do that? I wish there was more of that. You know what I mean? And maybe that's an old guy thing, but it isn't really, because everybody's affected one way or another. And, music has always been about one thing or another, about sharing a message or escapism one way or another, or, or fantasy, or dealing directly with issues straight on,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you think about those stories too, Bob, right? Where like CSNY, right after Kent State, they recorded that song within 2 days and released it within a week,
Yeah.
Or even John Lennon, what was it, like 72 hours between when he recorded and pressed Instant Karma, or something, it was something very quick.
Yeah. And to be fair, that's one of the luxuries of modern life, is that we as artists, we can create work and put it out immediately, and we can affect change that way. I mean, the business still moves at the rate that it, generally moves, where it takes months between finishing something and when people hear it. But yes, the instances like what you said, that's the spontaneity and the power of music to speak to the moment.
Yeah, it's great. So when you were working on the record with Steve Albini's studio, did he produce as well, or did you just use it to record?
Just used his studio. Steve was around. He always pops in and says hi a couple times during the sessions. But it was myself and John and Jason and Bo Sorensen, who this is the 5th album he's worked with. We've all worked together on.
Yeah.
And it's Bo he's flying the plane. We're out on the tarmac making noise, and then when all the parts are right, those John and Jason go home, and me and Bo sit there and try to make it sound like it should. So
yeah.
But Steve's place, it's been documented. I think it was was it the Sound City doc?
Yeah.
Yeah. So people have seen that room. That was the Cheap Trick track.
Yeah.
And Jason was talking in the movie as well. But it's a great facility. Steve is Steve has impeccable taste in equipment, and his A room that he built it's one of the few rooms that can withstand the way we make records, the high volume.
Yeah, which I think is great. Like the live shows that I've seen way back since the early days on SST days. We go back, and let's talk about when you formed Husker Du back, at the end of '79. You were literally just starting college around that period of time, right? You were.
Yeah. So, I was born in 1960. I grew up in a small town in northern New York State, a town called Malone, like 5,000 people, very homogenous, sort of white, lower income farm town. And, I knew that I needed more than that in my life. So I started applying to schools. I got accepted at McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota. I went out there in 1978. I was 17 years old. And met Grant Hart and Greg Norton, the other two members of Husker Du, and we started up in March of '79, so I was 18 years old. And we started sort of as a covers band with another guy who played keyboards. We did 2 shows like that, and we cut him loose and started writing original material. And I think 5 weeks later, we had a show at the Longhorn down in Minneapolis. And the great story about that was the way that we got that first gig was to sort of set the stage for people. The Longhorn Bar and Grill was in downtown Minneapolis. It was in the basement of a parking garage building, I think, but sort of a beat up place. But it was like a businessman's lunch thing, which was big in the '70s. You go get your all you can eat prime rib or something.
Yeah.
And we were having a hard time getting the owner of the club to pay attention. So we went down during businessman's lunch
Yeah.
and snuck in and set up on the stage and started playing.
Yeah.
We were running out. What are you doing? We're like, we're Husker Du. We want to play your club. He's like, okay, just stop. I'll give you a gig next Friday, or opening for Curtis A or whatever it was. But that was a funny way to get started in the sort of the real life adventures of Husker Du. And back then I was going to school at McAllister, and you mentioned SDS. McAllister was is still a really progressive school. Like Mondale taught there, Humphrey taught there, Kofi Annan went there. So it was a big political science school. And during the Vietnam era, if people participated fully all day in SDS activities, they got a 4.0 grade average. So,
wow, which is amazing.
Yeah, it was a really great school to go to, but the flip side was also, I was there when this whole Young Republicans thing started. I remember seeing these kids with expensive suits and briefcases talking about Ronald Reagan and all these things they were going to do to clean up America. And I was just like, fuck these people, man. I want nothing to do with this.
That was a good time to start a band too, right?
A good time to start a band. A good time to start a band that had an eye on local politics and, sort of world politics, but not being very worldly, but understanding, being on the correct side of the fence and stuff like that. So yeah, so that was the beginning of my, first time I stepped on a stage for all of $6. Yeah, 1979.
Do you remember some of the songs you did when you were doing the covers originally?
Oh yeah.
Greg?
Yeah, doing a lot of doing like a lot of surf stuff. Because Grant had that Farfisa organ, and our friend Charlie, who was the keyboardist and the lead singer, he could belt out a mean sea cruise.
Yeah, yeah.
But we were also doing stuff, with Buzzcocks, stuff off of Perubu Modern Dance, Velvet Underground, the stuff that, some stuff easy, some stuff harder songs, but yeah, things like that. And then, after we started doing original stuff, there was no looking back.
Yeah, of course. It's funny. It was so sad we lost Pete Shelley 2 years ago, Buzzcocks they were such a great influential band. There's no question about it,
Yeah, Pete was a big influence on my songwriting for sure. Just in the sense that I didn't recognize it at the time, but Pete was writing these gender neutral love songs, and I was like, wow, that's a really great way to get around outing oneself, is just to
before you came out. And Pete, I don't know if he ever came out. I mean, he was bisexual, but I don't, but he definitely had a good way of writing that and figuring that way to do it and to write, right? So you took a cue from that, you're saying. I took
the cue from that, and it was partly conscious, partly unconscious. But what I learned from that is, a love song is a love song, no matter who the two people are.
Yeah.
And that was the beauty of the Buzzcocks, that it spoke to everybody. And I guess that's what I picked up from Pete,
Yeah, it was such great stuff. Do you remember what that first tour with Husker Du was like? Was it in a van or was it a station wagon? What did you have when you guys went out on the road when you first
Oh my God. Well, the first time that we went out of town, the first time we went to Chicago to do a couple shows, I think Grant went to a local car dealer, and I think the owner of the car dealer was running for office, like to be, ombudsman or, city council or whatever. And I think Grant's dad taught at the local high school. So Grant did this thing where he's like, well, maybe we can help support your campaign, but I really want to test drive this station wagon. So we ended up test driving it to Chicago and back to do a couple shows.
That's great. It was smart. That was smart on Grant's part, right? I mean,
you're very resourceful like that. So, but that was, our first times out of town, and we went, and Chicago was the big city, compared to Minneapolis. And, that was our first taste of seeing what punk rock or an early hardcore looked like outside of our own, little scene in Minneapolis. And it was a real eye opener. And then, we would go to Chicago regularly, and then the first proper tour was the summer of 1981.
Was that around Metal Circus? And then
no, it was before. It was a tour that went Western Canada to the West Coast to Chicago, and then when we got after 2 months of crazy touring, we got back to Minneapolis and recorded what became Land Speed Record.
Right. Wow. Right then. Oh, that's far back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even before, that's amazing. Thinking back about it. Do you remember playing in New Jersey, City Gardens?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember going to City Gardens?
Yeah. Yeah. City Gardens in Trenton, to be a big old warehouse, you know?
Oh my gosh. You know, when I was out doing the book tour, I did a show for Randy.
Yeah. Randy's a great guy.
He's great. He's great.
Randy.
And of course, I remember the gigs at City Gardens when Jon Stewart was bartending in the back room.
Yeah.
Sort of formerly of the Daily Show. Yeah.
Right. Which, I mean, it all comes full circle with you writing the theme song for the Daily Show, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up.
You really can't, but it's brilliant, you know? So, I mean, you know what people ask me all the time, and I'm sure you hear this, Bob, is, you know, will there ever be special editions of the SST records? You know, because I know there's obviously probably some tapes, but is that because the Greg Ginn thing? Is it the same with you guys in Black Flag? Because I know that a long time ago, Henry had said to me, he goes, I don't know if there'll ever be, you know, any special editions because of just stuff that's tied up legally. Is that pretty much what
yeah, I think, you know, I mean, all of the SST records are still in print. They're still, you know, SST still owns those records, and I don't think they'll ever let them go because I'm guessing that it's probably keeping SST going, which is fair. You know, it's, you know, to revisit those records, I mean, to me, there's sort of a beauty of the way they were as the way they should be.
Right, and just kind of leave them alone and as remembered as they were as a piece of music. Like
yeah, it's I don't know if they need to. You know, I mean, of course they could sound a little bit better. I mean, technology is you know, we've come a long way with the way things can sound. But I mean, they're still in print. People can still find them. But as far as any kind of rebundling or re-engaging on a project type basis with SST, I don't know. I'm pretty busy right now.
Yeah, you've done a million things since then.
Yeah,
you know, which is incredible. When it came time, like to do the first, you know, when of course you saw so many of those great Husker Du shows and tours, which were amazing. But when it came time when you went solo the first time around, tell me about that. Like, we went out to like a farm and started writing and working on the songs for Workbook. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so you know, 1987, the beginning of the year was the release of the last Husker Du record, Warehouse Songs and Stories. Yeah. And the night before we were going to go on tour, our office manager David Savoy killed himself, and that was pretty tough for all of us. We took a couple weeks off and sort of joined our own tour halfway in, and then, you know, made up the stuff. And we started writing in the summer of 87 for what would have been the next record. And Warner Brothers, you know, they were very good to us, but we had just applied this pressure to have our second release be a double album. So, you know, it maybe was a difficult thing for them to sell. So they were looking at this, what would have been the third Husker Du album, for sometime in late 1988, I suppose.
Right.
As being, you know, they were like, we let you guys do everything you wanted to do for 2 records. It went pretty well, but now is the time we really need to try to make you one of the biggest bands in the world. So we're going to need to get you a producer and an engineer and make proper records and do all these things that everybody does. And you're going to have to get a real booking agent and a real management. And we're just sort of like, we don't really roll like that. We sort of do our own thing.
I mean, that's why you signed with them in the first place, because, you know, when Candy Apple Gray, when you did it, they were hands off, weren't they? I mean,
yeah, that was Karen Berg was our A&R person, and they were very hands off in the creative part.
Yeah,
and they were really supportive on the business side.
Yeah.
So, but I think, you know, they wanted a bigger return on their investment, and rightfully so. I get it. That's part of doing business with corporations. But, you know, we were resistant. You know, they were like, well, who who'd be your dream producer? And we were like, well, how about George Martin?
Yeah.
And they were like, well, don't know if we could do that. We could probably get Jeff Emmerich. And we're like, oh, okay, well, and then they were like, how about Pete Townsend? And we're like, well, anybody else? Who else we got? And I think we met with Hugh Jones, I think he'd done Modern English at that point.
Yeah, but Hugh Jones had done like that after the Snow album with I Melt With You. Yeah.
Yeah, so he had hits, and it was guitars and I get it. I see where they were trying to go with us, and that's all good. So we were writing, and we had songs for what would have been the next Husker Du record, but the problems were already happening inside the band. Grant was going in a different direction. Greg had gone in a different direction, and I was starting to check out. So fast forward to December of '87, I decided to leave the Twin Cities and move up halfway to Duluth. I bought a farm up there with a bunch of land, and I just wanted to get away. I think I was just get away from everything, including Husker Du.
Yeah.
The band broke up in January of '88, and so I'm up on a farm by myself with no band, no record deal, no nothing. And I'm like, well, okay then. So this is what you wanted. So what are you going to do with your creativity now? And the biggest thing to me, Matt, was not doing what I had just done for 8 years. It's like, why would I leave Husker Du only to make another record that sounds like Husker Du? That wasn't the point. So relearning how to play guitar, picking up the blue Strat, picking up a 12-string, getting into world music and Celtic music and Appalachian music, and working with alternate tunings and doing a lot of free verse and longer short stories, and using those as foundations for lyrics, just trying a lot of different things. And after a year of messing around with a lot of different ideas, I came up with, I think 15 songs that were pretty solid, that, 13 of which became Workbook in 1989. So, but it was an interesting year. It was very different for me.
I mean, coming off that tour too, because you were, the shows where you were doing the entire Warehouse album as well.
Yep.
I remember that show at Rutgers University, which was a great show. You played there with that too, and it was your second double album. So it was like, oh, this microphone, guys, this is pretty funny. This is what keeps falling. You keep hearing it anyway.
That's cool.
Get this thing right, but yeah, I guess at this point, like you said, and it was so great. I remember hearing the first notes of Wishing Well and going, wow, and just being knocked out by that. And then there was Song for Song was such a beautiful record. I mean, Heartbreak a Stranger, and of course, everybody You See a Little Light became a really popular song from the record too. But as an overall album, it was just a brilliant record.
Thank you.
When it came time to start deciding who was going to end up playing on it, how did that come about with Anton and those guys?
Well, and after the I had been friends with Anton Fear through a friend of ours, Steve Fallon, who used to run a club called Maxwell's in Hoboken, New Jersey.
In my hometown, in my home state, home area.
Yeah. And, Steve was a dear friend, and he suggested Anton as I think Anton's name had also maybe come up as a possible Husker Du producer like Hugh Jones or Pete Townsend. So, I knew Anton casually, and I remember he came out to the farm in the summer of '88, and I played him a lot of the music I was working on, and he got excited, so he helped me record the album. And he, again, when I mentioned Para Ubu being one of my favorite bands, in the early days, he was like, oh, I grew up with Tony. We grew up in Cleveland. Let me see if Tony would play bass. And they had played together with other, in other configurations. So that made for a great rhythm section. I just said, sure, that sounds great. And I remember when the three of us got together, we spent a week doing the basic tracks at Paisley Park. And the three of us played together great. And then we toured together, we made Black Sheets of Rain together and toured that. So we, worked together for 2 records, 2.5 years.
Yeah, which was great as well. Yeah. Another great record. So that period was pretty amazing. And then, so with Sugar, How did you end up the relationship with people like Dave Barbie? Now, Dave, I know, is teaching still at University of Georgia, right? Which is,
Yeah.
I was born in Athens, so I run into.
Oh my God. I didn't know that.
No, I was born in Athens, Georgia. That's where.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's my birthplace. So yeah, so it's you know, I love it's a music-rich town, and I love the history, of course, and so I know that Dave's still teaching over there, and but I love that lineup too. Tell me about how you made that transition.
Well, yeah, I guess, after, Black Sheets of Rain, the second album that came out in fall of 90, it was a darker record. It was a louder record. It was very reflective of the touring that we had done in 1989, where everything got turned up every night to full tilt. So, and, I had just ended a long relationship. So, it was a little more ponderous, a little more introspective, heavier, a little angrier affair than Workbook maybe. And we did the touring on that. And, I just wanted to sort of leave things where they were with Anton and Tony. I think we had done what we wanted to do. I had management through that stretch, and I found out some, not good things about the way my business was being run. So I sort of had to clear the decks and start over. And that's, I think, the spring of 91. I just went out on the road and started workshopping, playing solo acoustic electric shows and writing like a madman. And, every month I'd go out and play 3 weeks of shows and try out new songs. And I just kept doing that and doing that. And then my newer partner at that time was from Athens, and he was friends with David, and I knew David's band Mercyland from Athens. And so there's David, and Malcolm Travis, the drummer. I had produced an album for a group called the Zulus, which was a Boston band right around the same time as the Pixies and Throwing Muses. And the Zulus were the extension of what was Human Sexual Response.
Yeah.
So I had worked with Malcolm in the studio, and I knew he was a great drummer. So I had David, then I had Malcolm. I had all of these songs that I was writing and touring all of 1991 in the solo format. And early 92, I got those guys together. We went down to Athens, and we rehearsed in like a spare room of a tire shop in downtown Athens.
Yeah.
3 weeks learning what became Copper Blue and Beaster, and I guess 14 other songs that are in the box set, I guess. So, yeah.
It is amazing, right? You have that many songs at that period of time.
I had 30 to record, and I had many more that didn't make the cut. So it's
amazing. That album is such a classic start to finish. I mean, people love that record. I mean, I certainly one of those people. I mean, you remember, I think I told you the funny story where I did stand on the edge of the Hoover Dam singing Standing on the Edge of the Hoover.
Oh, yes.
With a couple of friends. And one of my friends has it on video. I found, recently he said, we filmed that. I'm like, really?
Oh,
so there's so many. I mean, I remember when Helpless was the first single that came out, and I remember playing that on the radio at the radio station in New Jersey, the commercial station down there, and just loving that record. And it was, and then of course, File Under Easy Listening was next, right? So
yeah, Copper Blue was fall of 92, and that did great. That was like the celebrated return to form. I think. Ryko Disc did a great job in the States, and we were, Sugar was on Creation Records in the UK. And, at that time, that was the beginning of the real rich period for, rich in creativity for creation. My God, it was like My Bloody Valentine, Swerve Driver, Primals. I think that was right as Alan might have found Oasis, Alan McGee, who discovered Oasis. I mean, there was, Boo Radley's. I mean, there was
great bands on there. They were amazing. I recently did a thing with Alan. Because he relaunched the singles label.
Oh, cool.
So for his creation website, I did a long interview with him. He's such a great guy.
Did he revive Pop Tones, or?
No, he's actually he's calling it Creation like 23 or something like that.
Cool. Okay.
So he's doing it, and he's got some really cool stuff. And he's also planning some kind of upcoming festival when a creation festival when the pandemic passes. But
Yeah.
he's doing great, man. He's healthy. He's doing good, man. It was great to catch up with him, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, that period in 92 when Copper Blue came out, I mean, that, Creation was on fire. The band Sugar got really hot in the UK first, and it got pretty hot in the States. And then I think it was the beginning of 93 with the If I Can't Change Your Mind video. And
yeah,
that's probably when you and I started doing business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
amazing as we go back in time. It's amazing it's been that many years, which is great, you know, and I love that. We've throughout the career, whether it's me being on the radio in New York City, or I mean, there's been so much stuff. So
we started interacting a lot more face to face, and I remember saying to Alan in late 92 as everything was on fire, and he was like, I think you're going to get NME Album of the Year. I said, well, Alan, we have that other record, why don't we, I'm going to call it Beaster. Why don't we put it out around Easter? Because it's got all this religious stuff in it. Yeah. Sounds like a good idea to me. So, we took those 6 songs that was like 30 odd minutes of music, and that came out right around Easter of 1993. And that was the most successful chart position I think that Sugar ever had. I think we were number 3 in the national chart in the UK the first week. Well, it was Bowie and maybe a Queen reissue or something. So that was weird and wild for me. I'd never had that kind of success. And we carried on, did a lot of touring in 93. And then, as you said, File Under Easy Listening, that was the third record from Sugar, the final record in 1994.
Yeah, which is it's amazing. But and then the solo thing came again. You've always kind of ventured out and did different things. I remember what was cool for a while. Because you were a big wrestling fan, you were actually writing for wrestling for.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had my little spell in Austin, Texas, with the File Under Easy Listening, and then the next 2 records, I think the Hubcap record and Dog and Pony Show were recorded down there. And then, in 1999, the wrestling thing was insane. I guess just the short story on that is as a kid, I was a big wrestling fan. I grew up near Montreal and used to go up to watch wrestling up there in the 70s as a kid. And Minneapolis was a big wrestling town. That was AWA, and that was Hulk Hogan and Vern Gagne, and all of that. Jesse Ventura was up there. He was a buddy of Husker Du at the time, and so I had friends in the business, and I sort of got sideways into the business a little bit in the 80s, and then in the fall of 99, a friend of mine, Gary Juster, who was working for World Championship Wrestling, which was Ted Turner's group. They had Monday Nitro and Thunder on Thursday, and there was an executive vice president of the company was taking a break, and they were looking for some new creative people, and they called me up and said, do you want to come in and help do the shows with us? And I said, yeah, you got to tell me what you want me to do, but I'll try to help.
Yeah. So that was, and you went in and started doing writing for them. That's amazing. When you were a kid watching wrestling, did you see people like Bruno Sammartino and all those back in the day? Because I remember wrestling was so different when you and I were young kids, but it was so cool to see that in like roller derby on TV, because
oh my God, they'd always be back to back, right?
Yeah, they were. And it was like, and it was really low production quality, but it was great. You loved it as a kid. I mean, just able to see that. Well, and Vince McMahon was a young kid as an announcer. I remember him being before he got all buff and everything and started running his thing, he was just a young announcer. Remember kind of did that whole kind of nerdy announcing thing back in the day when he got in, and it's really the history of that is so interesting. So it's cool that you got to do that. Was it a fun experience? And did you kind of draw from some of the things you saw when you were younger in those matches and say, oh, well, this would be kind of a creative thing to write? What was it like?
Yeah, I mean, that was, they had, I was a consultant, so it wasn't as if I was creating the show whole cloth. My job would be to try to keep continuity from week to week. Like if, wrestler A was mad at wrestler B, we got to remember that next week to carry the stories. And, sort of the kind of, like a quality control kind of thing. Yeah. And then they brought in some writers that they swiped away from the WWF at that time. And they came in and they wanted to do sort of the risque stuff. They wanted to do what they were doing for Vince up in New York, with a lot of the more things that I thought were a little more questionable, and they were. But they kept me on, and they actually found they put me at what in the wrestling business is called the gorilla position.
Yeah.
And that's where, in the old days, Gorilla Monsoon was the guy that would go down to the ring and give everybody the time cues, like, you got 2 minutes to go, wrap it up in 2 minutes or whatever. So that position became the man behind the curtain position, which what Vince does for WWE. You're on the headset, you're talking with the truck, all of the talent comes, they're the year of the last stop, they're like, what's my cue, when do I go? I said, he's going to say, and I'm the ruler of the world, and we're going to hit your music and get out there, and then you guys got 6 minutes, and this is what you're going to do, and blah, 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 and how much of a go-home cue do you need? Oh, 2 minutes before we go to commercial? Okay, and I would tell the referee on the wireless earpiece, and it was like an insane job, and fortunately, I'm good with time and math and numbers and, remembering stuff, at least then. My memory's not so great now. But so it was, I sort of learned that very difficult job very quickly and got really good at it really fast. So I stayed on for 7 months. I did what I could. But, I was a real student of wrestling as a kid. So I remember, sort of famous angles, as we would call them in the business, when you create the conflict between two people and how you get from the beginning to the end of the conflict and things that you do. Somebody throws fire, somebody steals a girlfriend, somebody, 4 flat tires on the side of the road, all that kind of nonsense, all the things, the tried and true stuff. And it was crazy.
Fun to recycle. Now, one of the other things that you did would blow off, and you were DJing for a while as well. You've done so many different things. And how did you enjoy that? Because I know that, I spun in clubs years ago, and it was always, that's a whole nother experience. So was it something you wanted to get into, and you just appreciated a lot of electronic music and just dance music in general?
At the same time that I went to work for WCW, I had gotten off the road from guitar music. I was living in Tribeca, and I was spending all my time like on Christopher Street and on 8th Avenue in Chelsea, deep into the gay life. And, the soundtrack of that life for me was club music.
Yeah.
All the big clubs, like Twilo and Roxy and Cielo and all, that whole era of amazing club music in New York City, that was my thing. And I was learning how to make that music. It was sort of similar in a way to being up on the farm in 1988, except it was totally out crazy gay Chelsea and big gigantic clubs and, that lifestyle.
Yeah.
And trying to learn how to make electronic music on my own. I recorded a few electronic albums, Modulate, and then I also did an alter ego project called Loud Bomb.
Yeah.
It came out in 2002, and later in 2002, I moved from New York City to Washington, D.C., and I only knew a couple people down there. One of those folks was a fellow named Rich Morrell, and Rich is a great musician. He did a lot of stuff with Deep Dish.
Yeah, I remember.
And he also did like guitar-based music as well. So he and I started hanging out and writing music together. And Rich was the kind of guy, he self-admitted recluse. He didn't go out much. Yeah. And I was new in DC, and I'm like, dude, come on, let's do something. Let's DJ or start a party or something. I need to meet people. I'm new.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was Blow Off was born in January of 2003 out of a necessity to make friends.
Yeah. And it worked out. That's great. And it's amazing how many different places you've lived. Cause I've lived all over New York City in those years, and I know all those areas. But it's incredible that I usually when I wonder where you are, I'm like, Bob, where are you living right now? Which is great to know. So how long were you in Berlin for? Because that sounds like that was.
From DC, I moved out to San Francisco in fall of 2009, and found a little cottage here and set up shop. And then in 2016, my current partner and I had been going back and forth to Berlin, just visiting friends in 2015, 2016. In the summer of 2016, we decided to move over there, and we found an apartment there and a small place to rent, and spent 3.5 years over in Berlin, Germany. It was a city that's, I mean, it's got an amazing history, with the arts and culture and music. It's still such a big rock and roll town, as well as being an amazing clubbing town. And I've always enjoyed it, and we just sort of took the challenge and set up shop over there for 3.5 years, and the pandemic ended that. But yeah, it was a really great time in my life. I miss Berlin so much right now. I love San Francisco where I'm at, but man.
Yeah. Did you ever go by Hansa Studios or anywhere where like Bowie and U2 recorded an Iggy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got asked to do a lecture and a performance in the big room at Hansa.
Wow.
And I remember going, and they took me into the control room, and they were, one of the people who owns the studio now is giving me the tour, and we're going out and looking at the drum room, the big marble walled drum room, and everything it's all there, and you're looking out the window, and you can see the old trenches, and I mean,
where the wall was when Heroes was created, right? And things
the whole thing. So then I go back into the control room, and there's like a gentleman just sort of sitting, messing with the tape machine, and my partner nudges me, and he just goes, "That's Meyer." I'm like, "Oh my God," who engineered all those records?
Yeah,
and I was like, "Oh."
That's incredible, yeah, and we love all those records. They're so classic, such an influence.
Yeah, so I got to lecture and sing and play "See a Little Light" in the big room at Hansa, so that was nice.
That's incredible. That must have been a blast. It's funny. I don't know if I ever told you this, Bob, because it happened in between. But I lived in North Beach, probably not too far from where you are, for a couple of years, 2016 and 17. I was in Paul Kantner's old apartment after he passed away on the corner of Grant and Vallejo.
Oh my God!
San Francisco, right? Like it's catty corner to Cafe Trieste, where where Coppola wrote those Godfather 1 and 2 scripts in the back of that coffee shop. So I lived on the corner, right in that apartment that used to belong to Kantner. Isn't that cool? It was great.
So amazing. I mean, that's the beauty of what you do and what I do. Where we have that freedom to put ourselves into these situations, different places. Yeah, Berlin for me, I lived in the old gay neighborhood in Schöneberg, and it was Christopher Isherwood. Bowie and Iggy's place was between my house and the gym. Just stuff. I lived I lived in the attic above a gay bar. I mean, in the middle of like Folsom, Europe. Fetish Street Fair would be like out my window every year, and I mean, it's just sort of like seeing all of that deep, walking by the El Dorado every day, where that was where Cabaret was, and now it's an organic food store, and it was.
It's amazing that Cabaret was there, right? Is that close? Yeah. All that history.
Oh my gosh, all that history and just the vibrancy of that city. I mean, it really lives on there. Just that progressive ideas, and not to sort of weave back to politics in America right now, but I mean, it would be things like I'd go out in the morning and go out to have coffee, and I'd get to like Hauptstrasse, like the main street, and there'd be a protest, and I'd be like, oh, I wonder what's this all about? And it'd be something about women's reproductive rights, and it'd be 1,000 people marching and chanting peacefully with signs, and everybody stops what they're doing and they stand on the sidewalk and they watch. And if you approve, you do that, and if you don't, you just sort of and leave. And that's what democracy is, right?
Yeah. With nonviolence, which is
and with no police presence. It's just like we are going to protest now because we want our voice to be heard. Oh, okay, go ahead and protest. I'll agree or I'll not agree.
Yeah.
Amazing how we can do that as people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now I know that you're in the Bay now. Is that somewhere you would move back to once this pandemic ended, or do you think you'll probably stay in the States?
Well, I forfeited my visa to because I can't keep a place there now. There's no travel back and forth. Yeah. So I mean, I look forward to going back to visit, but it's doubtful that I could up my visa. I think it's pretty much, I got one, I had an extension, and the next step would have been, do you want to get a passport?
Yeah.
Now that I've sort of broken that sequence, I don't know if I can get back in it. So
yeah.
But I mean, my bicycle is still, you know, there's that joke, you always have a suitcase in Berlin. Well, all of my stuff is showing up from Berlin any moment, except for my bicycle. So I left my bike there. So I have a bicycle in Berlin.
Yeah. It's amazing. That's great though. I'm glad you had a good time there. And you know, you're back here. Do you miss being on the road and actually being able to perform for people during this period?
Yeah. This is crazy. I really don't know what to do with myself. I mean, I was go for 40 years.
Yeah.
And touring. And I mean, you know, people often, they have this idea like, oh, you must have the best life. It's like, yeah, I do. But that life is hard. Yeah. Touring as you get older is really hard. And, you know, when you're, you know, anywhere between 60 to 100 days a year, you're getting dropped off at the curb of an airport to check in and do all this stuff. I mean, no complaints, but man, it's a crazy life, you know, being a working musician, touring the world. It's wild. And for me, I would get this rhythm that it's like cycle after cycle of, you know, isolating myself for months to write music, and then spending a couple months recording music, and then spending 4 to 6 months waiting for people to hear it. And then you spend a year out performing it, and then you regroup and you start that all over again. Now to have that chain completely broken, you know, I'm at a total loss as to what to do. And you've seen me, Matt. It's not like I'm a quiet guy. Like when I get on stage, it's the spit is flying.
Yeah, it's full on. Yeah, it's great.
Flying. I'm the last person who will go back to work in America, apparently. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, you know, we look forward to that day when you can go out and tour.
And with Blue Hearts, I mean, this record is so built for the stage.
It is. I mean, it's just completely rocks. It's full of edge and attitude, and it really.
Yeah, and you. I mean, you hear the difference. Like Sunshine Rock with all of those orchestral arrangements and all of the detail work in that record. You know, it was a challenge to get some of the songs to come across on stage the way they did on record. But Blue Hearts, man, it was just like guitar, bass, drums, you know, some yell and a solo, and we're done in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those were tailor-made for getting a mosh pit going, for getting people to be like, hell yes, this is what living is like. And to have that all gone is sort of nuts. And I don't know if I'm the kind of guy that could do do like some kind of surrogate, like a drive-in show or a distance show or stuff. I mean, so much of what I've done my whole life is that connection with people.
Right up front. I mean, because you go back to those Husker Du shows, it was always like that. It was, you know, and even with Sugar, I mean, and solo stuff. I'm just saying you're right. But I mean, we would look forward to it. And, you know, there will be light at the end of this tunnel. I hope it's sooner or later. Absolutely. Because this record, you have to tour when we come out of it. Yeah,
I think by the second Wednesday morning in November, somebody will find the light switch and turn it back on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get the light back and we'll get back to work. But until then, it's just like, who can make plans with all of this chaos?
Yeah, I know 100%. That's why I thought you were the perfect guest for this pre-election week, to be honest with you. It was great. What have you? So we talk about, you know, I know it's always hard to narrow down to 7 albums. It's, you know, and it could be 7 albums you were thinking of that day, but because there's so many records you love. You're like me. We're total music sponges, Bob. From the time we were kids, you know. And you have records that are on my favorites lists, you know, which I've actually, you know, published in my book, you know what I mean? So from different periods of your career. So, but I mean, you know, I asked you to pick 7 albums. We do that with everybody who comes on the show, just because 7 records are really important to them. It could be things that were, you know, help, you know, form and inform them about what they love and write, or just things that records that they love that week, you know, that come out of their collection. But you picked some great stuff. You know, and we talked earlier about Cheap Trick and Steve Albini, and it's funny because we're going to talk about a Cheap Trick album in a minute, but let's start with the first record, which is Beatles' Revolver, because I think it's such a perfect starting point, and what an incredible album. Why is it one of your favorites, Bob?
What an incredible album. Well, again, as a kid, my exposure to music was AM radio. It was whatever was on television, and twice a year I got to go to the department store and buy an album. And I remember getting Revolver as a kid. I was at 6, 7 then.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just such a deep impression, such a, this piece of vinyl and these amazing songs and these characters and that, the artwork, just the crazy, the collages and the photos. And I was just like, what is this world that these people are in? What is this magic that, is put this spell on me? And as I mean, the Beatles are one of my all-time touchstones. And, that Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, that trio of albums, is just, I mean, the pinnacle of the 60s, and just what music could do to the world, how those guys changed the world with those songs. Such a strong sense of melody, just beautiful arrangements, just all the variety on that record, just the edge and and then the sensitivity, and all the experimentation, just here, really, I think they were the, I don't think they were the innovators of flipping the tape over and recording things backwards, but I mean, they really dug in with that kind of stuff, and, just an amazing moment in time for pop music. And me as a 6-year-old kid, just magic.
Yeah, and it's such a great record. It holds up, and all of those Beatles albums are just great. But you're right about that period. I mean, Rubber Soul is when it started to change, where things, they incorporated, and then by Revolver, it's just such an incredible piece of music. And people get into arguments quite often about whether it's Sgt. Pepper or Revolver that are the best one. You'll hear that kind of thing going on.
Yeah, two completely different records, but they work so well, one after the other. I mean, Sgt. Pepper being the, sort of the concept album, and it's a, to give a quick nod to that record, I typically look at my albums, I sort of look at Sgt. Pepper and go, oh, that first thing where you hear the orchestra tuning up and they come out and we're Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. We hope you like the show. I mean, that idea of the soliloquy as the start of an album, and then going through to a day in the life even, and then how that concludes. I mean, that's like a really, that's a template to build albums with as an artist.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Now, the next album you picked was The Byrds, and they had so many great records early on. And the one that you picked was Younger Than Yesterday, which is, I love this record because, things like Have You Seen Her Face? I mean, I just think so good. Tell me about the tracks on this record and that you love and why you love it.
Stuff like My Back Pages, Renaissance Fair, Mind Gardens. I mean, there's so much Studio 102. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff on the deep album, start to finish. It's funny. I heard that record. Our mutual friend Peter Buck played me that record.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew of the Byrds, but one of my trips down to Athens just to hang out with Peter and with Michael and with other friends down there, we were just, listening to records one night. It'd be, Big Star and whatever, and then the Byrds and Younger Than Yesterday. I was just like, this is amazing. I mean, I know the Byrds, I know their hits, but I never really got deep into their albums. And that was right around the Metal Circus going to Zen Arcade era for, it was like 83, mid 83. Yeah. And that record really opened my eyes to, sort of that was the beginning of the Byrds, sort of their neo psychedelic phase. And, I mean, that was something that was a key for where my writing was going to go with Husker Du, leading up to Zen Arcade. So that it's really important to me in that sense, that, it's just like, having that thing when you get together with friends and you listen to music and you hear something that's like a revelation, and then you sort of absorb the cover of it really quick. You don't get all the details, but you sort of get the idea. And mix it in with your own stuff. So yeah, that's why that record's real important to me.
Yeah, it's a great one. I love that you discovered that down in Athens. Now, next up, chronologically too, would be Cheap Trick's In Color. And we were talking about Cheap Trick earlier. And I love, there's that story about, I love that record too. It's my favorite Cheap Trick album. It just has that place for me, with all those songs on there. And, you probably had this conversation with Rick Nelson too, where he said, they couldn't be there for the mix because Kiss told them you can either join our tour for Europe, you either go for all of it or none of it. So they literally recorded it and then handed it over to Tom Werman. And, years later, they said, well, they didn't love the mix. So they had Steve Albini redo it, of course, and redo the record. But, but I love the album. I think it's a phenomenal record, song for song. And, tell me why you love this one, because it's their second album. And, man, I think it's just a great one.
It's really great. So in high school, I started going to concerts at the Montreal Forum. And the first concert I went to was Aerosmith on the Rocks tour.
Yeah.
And Rush was the opening act. And I thought, I was shit-faced, vomiting, drunk, stoned kid at this first big rock show I'd seen. I was also a really big Kiss fan at the time. So I saw Kiss a couple times. And one time that I saw Kiss, it might have been Destroyer tour, probably Destroyer. And Cheap Trick opened, and Cheap Trick killed them.
Yeah, it was great.
I'm watching Cheap Trick. I'm like, who are these crazy people? Who is this, white satin singer and this goofball with the ball cap and the crazy guitars, and who's the accountant on drums, and who's the and we've got the cover up. It's like it was that whole like yin yang thing where there was the two rock stars and the two nerds.
Yeah, that's what was a great thing. Why it's such a great cover.
Yeah, because you flip that over and it's in black and white. It's Rick and Bunny on little bikes.
Yeah, which is hilarious. I mean, it's great. I mean, it was funny. I was talking to Tim Armstrong. I ran into him the other day, and that's exactly what he was saying. He said that's one of the greatest album covers of all time for that very reason.
And it was really cool because it was sort of a bridge to punk rock because, Matt, a lot of why Husker Du and so many bands of the 80s did what we did is because there was no place for us in that white satin rock and roll world. So, it's funny with Cheap Trick, you could have part of it that way and you could have part of it being the other way, sort of a little grimier, a little not so beautiful. So maybe that was a way that I was getting towards punk rock. But I just remember seeing that Cheap Trick show and just being amazed and buying the first album. And then when this came out, I was like, my God, this record's just stunning. So, great, 10 great pop songs, just one after the next.
Yeah, like Gowned is such a great, and then everything on there.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I love all that stuff. It's just
Yeah, and Cheap Trick, I mean, I'm so happy for them over the past decade that they've had a renaissance and, Rock Hall and all that. I mean, I'm real happy for them. And Jason, my bass player, lives in Evanston, and he's close with those guys. So he champions that band even more than I do. And, no shame in saying when I was looking at Copper, Blue, and Beaster and thinking about, how I wanted Malcolm to approach the drums, I was sort of like, listen to In Color.
Yeah.
Listen to the way that Bunny ends a verse, that da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I got to play with Bunny one song.
Yeah, that's cool. That must have been great, though.
We were doing a thing in Chicago. It was a fundraiser, and we did If I Can't Change Your Mind. And I remember running through it at sound check with him, and he was such a stylish player. And I remember I walked back and I was just like, man, that snare drum sounds like it's a million miles wide. What's going on here? And I looked back and Matt, have you ever looked at like a drummer's snare drum and the thing you do is you look to see how big the sweet spot is?
Yeah.
He was so accurate. It was like the size of a dime.
Wow.
Where you're seeing the snare, just like the divot was just down like the size of a dime.
That's amazing.
I'm like, man, that's accuracy.
Absolutely. To hit that close every single time.
Yeah, and just that evenness of the sound, just every hit was even and smart. It was just Yeah,
metronome kind of thing, right? Where he could actually play that perfectly. But
his time was just to have that, know that exact tiny spot to smack that drum. That's good stuff.
It really is. Now, the next album you picked is a pivotal album for all of us, and people around your my age. It was a very divisive album too. The beauty of this record at that time was, if you loved it when you were a kid, some of your friends got it. The other ones were like, what is that? And I love the fact now that you go to any stadium and you hear, "Hey ho, let's go." But, back then, people were either violently opposed to it or they just loved it and embraced it like I did and like you did at that time. So we're talking about the debut Ramones album from 1976.
Yeah.
So let's tell me why you love
that.
that.
That one changed everything for everybody. I was playing guitar for about a year, playing metal songs, just teaching myself how to play, not real good. But I used to read Rock Scene magazine every month. I used to go to the drugstore and buy it. And, it was a magazine that covered Kiss, Aerosmith, Nugent, all that kind of stuff. But it also covered all the downtown New York stuff.
Like New York Dolls were in there and all the time, right?
All Blondie Television, talking to everyone. So it was Richard and Lisa Robinson who spearheaded the magazine, and Danny Fields had a lot to do with it, I think. And so I remember seeing pictures of this group called the Ramones, and I didn't know what they sounded like, but I would see those like photo essays where the Ramones buy a PA. It showed them dragging the PA out of Manny's and putting it in a van or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, this looks cool. This looks fun. This would be great to do. So I got that record for my 16th birthday, and I did not know what to expect. And I put it on the turntable, and I was like, yep, this is it.
Yeah.
If these guys can do this, I can do this.
Right.
There's no excuse I cannot be in a band.
Yeah, they were so a starting point for so many people to realize that they could pick up instruments and learn, even if it's only a few chords. And they did so well with them.
Yeah. And there was, just, all the surf influence and the girl group influence, and just, that just downstroke rhythm guitar, that just really simplistic approach. And also, that was a great record to learn how to play to, because the bass was on one side and the guitar was on the other. So as a kid, you could just go over and listen to the bass guitar and then play along with that. And then if I wasn't sure, I'd go back over to the other speaker and listen to what Johnny was doing. Like, oh, he went like that. Okay.
Yeah, and then you hear Dee Dee over here.
Yeah.
The whole thing with Tommy producing those first couple of albums, right? You know what I mean? When he worked on those, he did it. I love the way they sound. And I don't know, what did they cost? I think it cost maybe $2,000 or $3,000 to make that record.
The first album did not cost a whole lot. And it didn't take them a whole lot of time either. It was a really great record. So and then when Leave Home came out, was the first time I saw the Ramones. They were opening for Iggy Pop in a small theater at the University of Montreal, and I think that was the Idiot tour. And Iggy was a little, wasn't, Iggy was Iggy, Idiot, period, Iggy.
Yeah.
But the Ramones came out, and it was like 40 minutes of just, 3 or 4 songs, and then they'd stop for a moment.
Sonic Assault, right? It was a Sonic Assault, and it was
and go back and look at pretty much any Husker Du show. Look at any Sugar show. Like 2 songs take a quick break, 3 songs take a quick break.
Yeah, so, I love that. It was just like count it off and move, which was great.
Yeah. And I loved how Dee Dee's counts never had anything to do with the tempo of the song.
They didn't. That was the
best part. 1, 2, 3, 4. Because
they could be going in a totally different direction.
It'd be the same count for the slow song.
So for like I want to be your boyfriend.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I love, on that album too, the fact that like Let's Dance was like, when you hear the Chris Montez version, it's so mellow. And then Ramones made that just this great rock anthem, right?
Yeah. The first 4 Ramones albums are just, they're life-changing.
That's the run right there. Those first, right through Road to Ruin, right?
Yeah, Road to Ruin had the biggest, most modern production at the time too.
Yeah,
for what they could, for what they did, it was like everything was so clear and bigger sounding, and like God forbid a couple guitar overdubs. It was
it was great though. It so was All those records still hold up and are so influential. I love the next one you picked, My Bloody Valentine. Your label mates on Creation, Kevin Shields on guitar. What an incredible player. And this record is really their pinnacle. I mean, they did put out a lot of cool things before that, a lot of singles, you know, and that the album before it. But Loveless is amazing. Tell me why this is such an important album to you, Bob.
Well, it was December of '91, I think, as the album was just coming out. And I was over in the UK, and that was the year that I was doing nothing but solo shows. And I remember doing a week of shows towards the end of '91 in the UK, and I was touring around. It was myself and my partner at the time, and then the support act was Heather Frith, who became Heather Nova.
Yeah.
And she was managed by Abbo, who used to run Big Cat Records.
Yeah.
And was he in Jesus Jones, I think, maybe, or worked with them or something? Anyways.
Yeah, he did.
So Abbo was driving us around. We all got in one car and we did a week of shows. And I think it was after a Manchester show, we were driving back to London overnight. And he was like, "Oh, have you heard the new My Bloody Valentine album? They're label mates." I said, "No, I've heard of them, but I've not heard their music." And he put it on, and it was a nice car, and we were just listening to it full tilt, 100 miles an hour down the motorway. And I was just like, what is this insane music that we're listening to? You know, it's just all of those drones and just the density and all the hidden melodies, and you know, everything sounded in and out of phase at the same time, and nothing, and everything was connected with those interstitial pieces. And, and that was really, you know, I mean, I did not know the music they made prior to that. So I loved that album. And then I started going backwards. And then you know, as time went on, I got to know, you know, Kevin and I got to be friends, and I didn't know that he was such a big fan of Husker Du. And I mean, all the Creation bands like Swerve Driver and,
you know, speaking of another great band, Swerve Driver, too, right?
Yeah, I mean, Mescal Head would have been my other album that I would have put right there. But
Raise, right? The first one?
Raise was great. I mean,
or was it
the Mescal Head was the one that I really...
That was the one you loved with Duel and all that on it,
right?
Yeah,
Duel and Never Lose That Feeling and all that.
Never Lose That Feeling was a great single, man. What a great single.
One of the best songs of all time.
Yeah, I love that.
But yeah, so Valentine's, I mean, yeah, it was, and then... It was cool because when Sugar was up in Stoughton, Massachusetts, making Copper Balloon Beaster, that was when MBV and Dino Jr. were doing the tour together in early '92, and we took the night off to go to the Orpheum in Boston to see that show.
Yeah.
So we were in the middle of Copper Blue Beaster, and then went to see that, and I was floored by them. And then, you know, that was, yeah, just really, really great. Really, really great music. Just from, it sounds like it's from another planet, or it did at the time, at least. Because I wasn't a big Cocteau Twins fan, so I didn't know that sort of ethereal female vocal swooning connection. I just sort of heard it for what it was, you know, sort of, you know, it was like they made a cold case. I didn't have any reference point. It was just pretty mind bending stuff. Really, to this day, still one of my favorite records.
Yeah, that's great. Now, you picked of the Garbage albums, you picked version 2.0. And I want to ask you, did you know Butch Vig and Duke from their old bands like Spooner and Firetown from like the early years? Did you know this before that?
Butch and I worked together in 80. I got to go back and get the right date, but I think it was like 83 or 84. There was a Madison skate band called Tar Babies.
Yeah.
Butch and I produced and engineered an 8-song EP for them at the original Smart Studio back, I think, late 83, early 84.
Yeah.
So that's the first time Butch and I sat at a console together.
Yeah.
But I knew of the band when I was in New York. Who was it that was working with them? Was it Mary Marcus? Maybe was the label rep for... What label were they on again? Was that Imago?
Yeah, it was like Almo Recordings or
Almo.
Yeah.
Almo Sounds.
Yeah, Almo Sounds. Yeah.
And so that was and I heard that record, and I just thought it was so incredible. You know, it had, you know, just the production techniques were amazing at the time, because that was before everybody had Pro Tools and everybody could do sort of loops and grooves that accurately.
Yeah.
and Butch is so great with sounds, and Shirley is such a dear soul and such a presence on stage. I mean, just conveying these emotions to, that were, sort of, darker stuff, but also very hopeful stuff, and strong melodies. I love how they could stitch together a bridge to a chorus that seemingly completely unrelated in key or feel, and just, I mean, that's some really good, really masterful songwriting and production on those records.
Yeah, it really is, And I love that you got to work with Butch again back around 2011 when you worked on the Foo Fighters record with Waste.
Yeah, we went to Dave's studio and got to work with Butch again. It was great to see him, and I'd gotten to be friends with Dave, and yeah, that was a nice way to bring that all back around. I think the world of Garbage. I mean, they were bringing that electronica and sort of loop-based idea. It was them and maybe like Massive Attack, and then shortly after that record, I guess like the Avalanches did that with. It's that pocket of where rock met electronica, and that was when I was trying to learn, how to make electronic music right before Modulate and Loud Bomb. So yeah, I mean, that was a real influential record.
That's great. Yeah, I just I think it's amazing. I love that, and they're always so cool. Shirley's been pretty low key. She's out here living in LA, not that far from me, but she's pretty close to home during this whole pandemic thing.
Yeah. We're all trying to take care of ourselves and do the right thing. But she's, if you see her, send my best. She did a wonderful testimonial for me recently for the box set, for the Distortion box set. So
that's amazing. I love that. I think it's so cool that she did that. That's great. What a great box set, by the way. We got one more album on your list, and it's the second album from Daft Punk, Discovery, with great One More Time and all that stuff that's on that record. Talk to me about why this was the one that you picked of their records.
It was I heard One More Time. I heard Harder, Bit Faster, Stronger. All the Digital Love, which is one of my favorites off that. It resonated with me. I was really digging the vocoder approach, as people would hear on Modulate, of course.
Yeah.
When I started to get familiar with what they did, and I saw the helmets and stuff, I was like, I think these guys are amazing, and I think they may have seen that Paul Williams movie, Phantom of the Paradise. Yeah. But I just said that to myself. I think they finally copped to it a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And then they had Paul on the most recent album.
Who's a great guy, by the way. What a nice.
Yeah, that was just wonderful to see them tie a bow on that part of their existence. With Random Access Memories. Yeah. But I mean, the record, it was so synthetic, but it had so much soul to it. Even if it was like a cold soul, sort of that robotic approach to pop music. I remember being, in settings where I just kept hearing One More Time and just thinking it was great. And I remember there was a period where I was down in Atlanta a lot in early 2002, and I would go to the gym every day about the same time, like late morning, and every day at noon, Digital Love would come on, or Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger would come on. I'd just be like, oh my God, it's like Groundhog Day every day with Daft Punk.
Yeah, I would be playing in the gym, right? Were you playing it, or was it actually playing on beat?
It was playing in the music in the gym. I'd be doing like on the leg machine. I'd be doing like leg presses or something. Be like, oh,
there it goes. It's that time.
And I love those guys so much, and I always tell people I think they're like the Beatles of electronic music, because they changed the game for everything. I mean, they opened the door for everybody after them, all of the French touch and French house, and stuff like Justice and Sebastian, and I mean, it's just so many things that came out of Paris off of their sound, and I loved all of that, and that really informed how I DJ'd. I DJ, French house was what I love to play for people, and still do when I play music for people, and such a fan. And then saw the Pyramid Show at 06 at Coachella.
Yeah.
I mean, none of us knew that was coming.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Oh, man, that was incredible. And then the to close that story up, the next year, those guys got to help book the Sahara stage, which was the second stage at Coachella in 07. And the whole day, top to bottom, was like Digitalism and Busy P and Medi, and just great stuff. And I was just hanging out on that stage all day, just watching everybody do their thing. And I remember a friend of mine came up and said, "Hey, have you ever met Thomas Bangalter?" I said, "No, I love those guys." He goes, "He's right over there. Let me go get him."
Yeah.
he goes, gets this dude, sort of unassuming, looking rock and roll sort of looking dude with a Night Ranger T-shirt and stuff. He's like, "Oh, this is Tomas," and he leans into me and he goes, "I listened to Copper Blue every day for 6 months straight."
Yeah. That's amazing.
What? What are you? You're kidding. And he's like, "Oh no." He goes, "I loved Husker Du. That music meant the world to me." I'm just like, "Oh my God." It just like made my world, I love how that, we get to share those stories, and when we get to meet people who change, my world with music, and then they're like, "Oh, but it was your music." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, it blows your mind, right? I mean, and we were, as I mentioned earlier, when you did "Dear Rosemary" with Dave on the Foo Fighters record, which was great when you guys wrote that together. I'm glad it was documented in that back and forth documentary. But I mean, it was cool too, because I remember being backstage and walking around, and didn't see you at that moment, but saw your name on the dressing room door because you were DJing during most of the shows, right? I mean, during that tour.
Yeah. So in 2010, when Dave asked me to help out with a song on the Wasting Light album called "Dear Rosemary," he wanted me to come down and sing sort of a back and forth kind of thing with him, and sing some backgrounds. And then like in the movie, he had there was the part where there's this was no ordinary life, no ordinary lie. When I'm gone. That part was, he wanted me to do like a Roger McGuinn 12-string guitar solo there. And I was like, "Dave, let's write a bridge.
Yeah.
Let's sing back and forth. Let's do a call and answer thing there instead." And so he was like, "Oh, give me a few minutes. I'll," and he came up with these ideas. I was like, "Yeah, let's do that and that and that." Yeah. And then Dave wanted, he was being very, very generous in 2011, having me come out and guest with them. He wanted me to come out and play "Dear Rosemary" and do shows like Do the Garden and the Spectrum and Fargo, and do like, Milton Keynes Bowl, 65,000 people and all that. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to do that. But Dave, I don't want to just hang around and just be the guy that comes on and does 3 minutes. Can I do anything else?" He's like, "Well, what else can you do?" I said, "Well, I've been DJing." He goes, "Well, why don't you just DJ? Do you want to DJ between all the bands on all these shows?" I'm like, "Yes."
Yeah.
Finally, I have something to keep me busy for 4 hours.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. That was cool that you did that,
Yeah, so that's what you saw me doing. And I would do that from the back of the room on the double secret probation hydraulic stage. Do the encore, and he'd be on that backstage.
Yeah, he'd run all the way under the venue, right?
Yeah, I'd go all the way under the catwalk.
That was always a pain. Like, just getting there on time was always a pain in the ass, just running under there. I mean, I give him a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, they pranked me one night because that thing was on hydraulics, and I was just finishing my DJ set. And one night before they came on, and I might have been running a little late, so they started testing the hydraulics with the DJ rig.
Your things are shaking while you're playing. That's funny.
Why are you guys doing this to me? I was just like, "Okay, no more music."
That's fun. That's great. Bob, listen, I want to thank you for taking the time today. This was great to have you. I'm really glad we caught up. Again, it was so nice. I mean, I love the book, and it was nice. And you said nice things about me in the book, and that meant the world to me because I've been a fan forever. And then we became friends, which was so important to me, and it was so great, and have been for years. And then again, when we did the tribute celebration night, See the Light, it was beautiful just to see all those people coming out. Like I said, Britt from Spoon, and of course Dave.
Yeah, Old Steady guys.
Old Steady guys, and Margaret Cho, and it was like Grant Lee Phillips. It was just a great group of people, and that Ryan Adams. I remember you and I standing on the side of the stage together, and Ryan Adams goes out and does Heartbreak a Stranger and Black Sheets of Rain. And you look at me and you go, man, how do we go on after this? Because it was like, remember how it was a pin drop and we were just, you were making a nod to him that you were just, you loved his versions of those songs.
Yeah, after Black Sheets, I think I might have said something like, well, I'm never going to try playing that song.
Yeah, it was
again.
something like that. You said to me, it was so funny. We're standing on the side of the stage. That was beautiful. It was just, and then when you got towards the end, you know what I mean? You know, when you were doing all the songs you did, and Dave got up and played New Day Rising, it was like thunder.
Yeah, it was good. But Dave was like, we got to play Ice Cold Ice. I'm like, Dave, that song's really hard for me to play. We got to do it. That's my favorite. That was the one, you know, when I had my nervous breakdown at Olson's Records after the Husker Du show emptied out in '87, and you know the record store got flooded. I was out of my mind. I was having a panic attack, and that was my song. I was like, okay, we'll learn it.
And yeah, so he loved that Warehouse Songs and Stories, all those records, and then you know, I just. And he was cool when he did Grand Song too, and he did Never Talking to You Again from Zen Arcade. He covered that like as a live thing. He loves all your songs. I mean, we talk about it. I mean, your song catalog is insane at this point. Bob, do you look back and just go, it's when it comes time to make a set list, right? I mean, you obviously focus on what's going on now, but do you ever just go, wow, how do I pick these songs? I mean, you obviously know your things that your favorites are of people.
Yeah.
But you have such an incredible back catalog of great songs. Does that make it harder to make set lists at this time?
No, I mean, our basic formula for a set list is, you know, sort of, we want to play at least half the new albums. So that's about a third of the show. And then we want to play the ones that people want to hear, you know, the hits, I guess, you know, If I Can't Change Your Mind, Favorite Thing, Hoover Dam, you know, what. You know, this To See a Little Light, those kinds of, you know, and I always love those songs. They make people so happy. And then, you know, and then the other third is where we get to play with, you know, how much Husker are we going to do? How many deep cuts are we going to do? You know, when we started bringing like Stan Guard back in, we were just like, whoa, yeah, I didn't think the three of us played like this. Okay, this is cool. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And Jason and John, I mean, it's just so amazing working with those guys for over a decade now, and you know they know the catalog, and they always have good ideas for what about this one, and most of the times it's real good. I think, you know, I remember everybody used to always be, why don't you play Moving Trucks off Last Dog and Pony Show? And then we worked it up, we played it one night and we thought it was great, and the crowd just looked at us like, what's that?
And you're like, oh, I guess I'm not going to do that anymore.
You never know, but yeah, it's so that's how we put sets together. You know, focus on new stuff, focus on the favorites, and then focus on deep cuts and, you know, Husker stuff that we know people are going to like, and that stuff's pretty easy for us to play too, because when you play fast, you don't notice the mistakes, right?
Yeah, it's a great thing. Bob, I really want to tell you, we love the new album, Blue Hearts, and for everybody watching us. I'm sure you probably heard it, but if you haven't, you've got to go listen to it however you enjoy your music. Yeah. I used to say however you consume your music, but I mean, music consumes you because it's a beautiful thing. So you can use that word. Because whether, you know, you decide you're going to pick up vinyl, sometimes CDs, but a lot of people stream right now. I mean, however you do it, it's, you know, the record's fantastic. There's so many great songs on it.
Thanks, Matt. It was a really fun record to make. It was a really crazy moment in time for me, you know, seeing this world that we're living in, you know, and this was before pandemic really started up, and it is just, I don't know.
Yeah.
People,
I know.
People.
Yeah, I have mine. It says vote on it.
You know? I got vote ones as well, man.
Yeah.
Please put on a mask. Please stay your distance. Please keep your hands clean, and please get out. If you haven't voted by mail or you haven't voted early, you got to get out and vote, and we got to turn this thing around, because if we don't do it now, we're not going to, you know, and like you were saying, Matt, the big thing to me is like, you know, I'm running my mouth about politics. It's not my strong suit, you know, but I think we're really at a moment in the history of the world where, you know, if you're an artist or you're a musician, if you have a platform and you have a voice and you feel strongly that we need to save democracy, you need to cash in some of your currency like in a hurry and speak up, because you may lose a few people, you may rankle some of your audience, but if we don't speak up now, we might not have voices in the next 4 years. And then if you don't have a voice, you got no audience at all. So just do the math, be safe, and please get out and vote. And hopefully you'll vote the correct way.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. I really appreciate you sharing everything with us today. It was great. I really do. And again, the album's great. I'm glad it was so nice to see some protest in music. You know what I mean? Just because of when you and I grew up, even if we didn't necessarily understand it so deeply at the time, looking back, we knew that it was commentary about what was going on. Even when we were kids, we knew that. But now we look back and realize, wow, how important was that? And it was.
Yeah. It puts that passion in you.
Yeah.
It's just like people are passionate in what they believe in, and they express themselves.
Yeah.
And it can also be fun and entertaining, and it can rock. But thanks for all the kind words, man, and all the decades of friendship and the decades of support. I much appreciated, and thanks for asking me to do this. It's been really, really fun.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Bob. Bob, take care, and I hope to see you soon when all this stuff passes. Well, I'm sure we'll meet in the city, either LA or San Francisco. I'll see you somewhere. We'll hang out, and I'll come see you play and grab some food or something. It'll be great.
I look forward to it,
Bob, thanks for taking the time. That was great. Bob Mould, everybody. It was so awesome today to have Bob in here, and I'm going to look up at the camera right there. I loved having Bob on. He's just been one of my favorite artists, consistently writing great songs. I mean, songs from the heart, songs that say a lot. I'm a massive fan of Bob's, and as an artist and as a human being. So I just want to tell you that. And I hope you enjoyed the show. I really do. Thank you so much for watching In a Lonely Place. And I say it all the time. Remember, you're never lonely. You're never alone as long as you have music in your life and you have some way to express how you feel. I really appreciate you joining me. My name is Matt Pinfield. I want to thank everybody at Rolling Live Studios who's been involved in the show today, of course. And, Chris Trevero, of course, Steve, and Laura Diaz, Alyssa, Josie, Carrie, everybody who's made this possible. So thanks so much for watching. If you missed any past episodes, please check them out as well. They're all up online. And once again, I want to thank Bob Mould. Get his new record. If you like vinyl, make sure you get it on vinyl as well. But it's called Blue Hearts. All right, take care. Have a great weekend. I'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.